Corbolic V2. This is a super safe and effective natural anabolic. Not only is this product going to help you increase protein synthesis, which basically means muscle recovery and growth, it also may inhibit myostatin, which is a protein in your body that is known to inhibit muscle growth. This is a complete natural anabolic that works through multiple different pathways, has multiple trademarked ingredients. If you are a natural athlete looking for that edge, Corbolic V2 is what you need. Get yourself some.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pro Physique Code. Lexie, Maitland, Evan, Wells, how are you guys?
Doing good,
buddy.
Well, hot off the presses, there was an announcement this morning. So we're going to talk today. Lexie, why don't you tell them today's topic, and then we're going to get into something before that.
Yeah, so I am a little unsure of what I'll title this podcast episode, but it'll be something along the lines of like, we're going to dive in and we're going to talk about when to hire a coach. Specifically, I mean, we're going to talk like when to hire a coach, whether you're a contest prep client or you are a lifestyle client, because this is a question that I know us three sometimes get, or we have some people that reach out and feel like, oh, I'm not ready to hire a coach. So we're going to talk about that. And then also just talk about what to do when you are ready to hire a coach, like how to do your research, how to find good coaches, how to interview them. And then also talk a little bit about like if you're a contest prep client seeking out a potential prep, what your coach should provide for you and maybe what you shouldn't expect them to provide with you. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of that.
Perfect. And then hot off the presses this morning, Tyler Mannion from the NPC headquarters made a video all about how they're going to grow the natural side of the sport next year. So I think, you know, I don't want to misquote, you guys go watch the video, but I think he said they're increasing to like 30 or 40 natural qualifiers, essentially mounting to the fact that the Ben Weider is going to be like the, I don't want to call it this, but like the natural Olympia, like the highest natural show. You're going to qualify for there to go get your pro card there. They also said they're going to be adding a pro qualifier like the Ben Weider in the spring. So I don't know if that's going to happen this coming up spring, but I have a feeling it is. And I have a feeling I know the show, but we'll find out. But yeah, so I think it's an interesting conversation because we've talked about the changes, you know, in the number of competitors. Now, again, the NPC doesn't really release their numbers of like how many NPC cards they have, but just looking at the athletes at the national shows, I mean, it's down like 35% in the open category for the bikini division, which is, I have that whole spreadsheet. And the numbers got a little bit shocking at North Americans when they only had 120 in open. And that included crossovers for masters. You take them out, might have been like 60, 70 girls.
Yeah. Well, I haven't watched the video yet. I'm excited to watch it after this, but it's ironic because I literally had a conversation with another competitor about this yesterday, just about like, I was actually saying I was kind of excited to see what the MPC was going to do and what they were going to implement next year. Cause I think that they probably see the declining numbers too. And I knew that they would.
And I'm not saying, I don't know that that's a direct correlation. I don't know if that's a response to that, or if that's just them going, okay, you know, like, you know, there are some, you know, we coach athletes in other organizations, and sometimes you go to these shows and there's 100 competitors at a natural show. You're like, wow. You know, when I was competing in natural bodybuilding, those shows got pretty big. WNBF Worlds last year had close to 400 athletes. So like,
Yeah, that's
it's
a good
out
point.
there.
And you know what's interesting is I know Evan and I we both had a client at a very big natural show this past weekend, and I know my client told me that the numbers were apparently at that show like record high. So you are right. I don't know if necessarily
Okay.
I wonder if
Yeah, it was high. It was the Yorton Cup, so there's a lot of people at that show, right? So
Oh, the Yorton Cup that's the one. I did that a couple of years ago. I actually got second in the world in men's physique pros in the tall class. You know, and one of my first early victories in life was having a client win the Yorton Cup in bikini. Like that was a big deal for me. I was very excited. And then last year I had a gentleman, Brian DaCosta, win the WNBF World Overall Bodybuilding title. So like those are feathers in my cap for sure. Like you take pride in those because those are big shows. So Yorton Cup is, for those that aren't familiar, Chet Yorton is a natural bodybuilder from the 60s who beat Arnold Schwarzenegger in a bodybuilding competition. He's one of the only people to ever beat Arnold Schwarzenegger. So that's why it's called the Yorton Cup. It's based after Chet Yorton. And also, small world, Chet Yorton's daughter is Shanna Yorton Pena, started Quest Nutrition.
Oh,
Nice.
no doubt. Okay.
Yeah. So
Oh,
like full circle. Yeah, like they're all there still. But anyway, so yeah, the Yorton Cup is like the world championships for the OCB, the WMB. And that's one of the big differences. So one of the things I've always been impressed with the NPC and the IFBB is how organized they are and how well run the shows are and the quality of the content. These natural organizations don't have that. So if you put that NPC blueprint on the natural side of the sport, it could be very special. It could like
Yeah, it could
unify
be.
things. I'll be curious.
yeah.
And shout out to my client Charity, who did win her height class at the Yorton Cup and just missed the overall there. So shout out to
Congrats.
her.
That's a big deal. Like that's Danica Johnson, who is a coach for Pro Physique and is also our mindset, mental health expert. She won the Bikini Yorton Cup, I think either the first or second year. So big deal.
It is.
Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just interesting that they're generating so much interest in that side. I'll tell you, I'm going to be at the show at the end of October in Boca, with a bunch of athletes that want to go do Ben Weider, because the requirement this year for the Ben Weider is you must compete in a natural show before the Ben Weider. Previously, you didn't have to; you could just show up. So
Yeah. I'll never forget. I remember last year, that was the first year that they required, like you had to qualify. I don't think last year they required you had to, like, I don't think you had to qualify.
it wasn't a natural show last year, but I think you had to have a top 2 in an open
Yeah,
class.
yeah. You had to just, I think, compete. Because I remember Steven had a client that literally had to like jump into a show like
Oh, was that last
2
year?
days
Okay.
before. Yeah, and I think she ended up winning the overall at the show. But I remember they like panicked because they put in that rule last year that you had to just like compete before going into Ben Weider. So yeah. Oh, and before I forget, I have to give a shout out. He asked, well, he sent me a video of him watching yesterday. Corey Lindner, if I'm pronouncing his last name
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I told him I'd give him a shout out because he sent me a video. He said he was working a shift at like I guess the firehouse, and he's like, "This is my favorite pastime, is listening to you guys." So thanks for
That's
listening.
awesome.
Yeah.
Appreciate you guys for listening. We love getting the feedback from you, and especially on YouTube. If you guys leave comments under the YouTube video, we will I see sometimes me and Lexie reply. Evan's slacking on the replies.
We need to get
We need
Evan
to
on.
do better.
We need to get him a channel where he starts vlogging his day.
Listen, I told
Ugh.
Evan has helped build a YouTube empire. He knows how to do it. This man refuses to do YouTube.
Yeah.
One day.
Well. All right. Well, should we start by diving into kind of the topic?
Yeah, I love the topic. I love the idea of, because it's such an interesting question. I think when you
Yeah.
brought it up to me, Lexi, I said, yeah, it's very funny because I have people that will reach out to me like after they get their pro card and they're like, oh, I finally feel like, I'm ready to work with you. And I'm like, oh, you couldn't, so it's like, when is the right time to get a coach?
Yeah, and I think this is a great time of year if we really think about it to talk about this because we are in fall now and we've got the holidays coming up and I think that a lot of times people kind of think, oh, well, I'll hire a coach after the holidays. And then also like for contest prep standards, if you're considering competing in 2025, like now is the time if you're not working with a coach, like if you want to set yourself up for success, hire a coach now, work with a coach now. So yeah, so let's kind of talk about let's talk about some things that we recommend or we like to look for in clients. Like if clients, let's talk about like, how am I trying to phrase this? Like things that we look for in clients, knowing that they're ready to sign up with a coach.
Start it off, Lexi. You're the
Start it off.
topic leader. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think like I would dumb it down to two main things first. First off, I think for starters, I don't think there's ever going to be a perfect time to just hire a coach. And if you're waiting for that perfect time, it's probably never going to happen and you're never going to hire a coach. But I think that one, you definitely want to make sure before you pursue and hire a coach that you are like relatively financially stable, right? That way, if you want to avoid being able to sign up for a month and then having to cancel because of finances, right? So you want to make sure you're in a financially stable position to be able to afford coaching. And I think the other big thing is, don't worry about where you're at physique wise, or like, how low or how high your calories are, how awful your diet is, or how, great it is. Like, make sure that before hiring a coach, as long as you're just coachable and you're open to implementing some change in what you're already doing, like, I think that's so important, because I feel like we've probably all gotten on the phone with clients before where they tell you their situation and they are, doing some crazy things, and then when you propose that that you're going to need to change things up, they kind of repel against that. So I think being willing to be coachable and willing to implement change, I think, is a big key, and something you should be prepared for if you're going to hire a coach.
I think that is absolutely huge. Being coachable, one of the most frustrating things as a coach, and something that I do ask a lot of questions on during initial consultations because I've run into this in the past, are people that come in and are like, well, this is the way I want to do it. And I'm not, like I tell everyone, I'm not going to come in and just like up into the apple cart, right? And like destroy everything that you're doing. But let's start working in some things here to make the changes we need to make to get you where you want to go. Um, but if you hire a coach and you are steadfast in your ways on things and you refuse to change anything, then why hire a coach in the first place? That's a big part of it. And two, it's understand kind of what coaching is. I think some people feel like if they just hire a coach, everything's going to magically stop working without them even doing anything. I've always described coaching like a car GPS, right? Like I can tell you where we're going. If you get off course, I can get you back on course, but I'm not a taxi driver. I'm not going to pick you up and drive you there. I'm not Uber or anything like that. And if you're driving and you swerve it right into a tree when I tell you to go left, like, yeah, let's get back on the road and do it. But if you keep swerving right into a tree every single solitary day, you're not going to get to where you want to go. And that's a big part of that with it. And I think some people think that just because they hire a coach, everything magically works. They don't have to do anything to lift a finger. And those are the people that last a month or 2 months and are kind of out the door with that, which honestly, I think we can all say is incredibly frustrating as coaches because we invest a lot of time up front with a lot of our clients. And it stinks to have somebody come in and a month later be like, yeah, this just isn't for me. And sometimes that does happen, but I do my best to explain the coaching process and kind of how things work initially with it. So before you hire a coach, make sure that you kind of understand what coaching is. And if you're interviewing a coach, I would ask them what their process is, how they want to communicate. Um, because some people think just because you hire a coach too, it's 24/7 open access. They could call you, text you whenever they want, and you can get right back with them. And that's not really realistic either, because if we had every client we had doing that, we literally couldn't do anything else with our lives.
Yeah, we're not babysitters, and like we can kind of go into this later when we talk about like what a coach should provide for a client and what they shouldn't. But I always say I try not to be a helicopter coach, so meaning like if somebody misses their check-in once, of course I'm gonna like check in on them, make sure everything's okay. Do we need to change their check-in day? But if it becomes like a repeat process, you know it's hard to be run after that person every week just because they're missing their check-in.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think this is the advantage of the initial consult, right? So I think the first step for us is we put out a pretty solid amount of content around competing. So it's pretty easy to get a good sense of who we are. There are the occasional person that will find us on a whim or on an Instagram link or something and just be like, hey, what are you guys about? But for the most part, when I get on a phone call with someone, they're like, I feel like I already know you. I know your cat's names. I know what shows you go to. That's the benefit of putting out some information. But that initial phone call is still a discovery of like, okay, what is working for you? What do you like? Because it's not a dictatorship. Honestly, we all have our philosophies. And some people will be like, oh, but I really find that I like this type of cardio. And I'll be like, okay, well, we can stick with it, but you have to be open. If I feel like it's a problem and I want to switch, are you open? They're like, yes. So I find that works really well for me, is incorporating some things that they're confident in, even if I'm 100% sure that they're wrong, building a little bit of trust first, getting them involved. And then, the common one I get is like, yeah, I've been watching your content for years. I just felt like, I wasn't good enough to be your client, or I haven't done enough shows to be your client or something like that. I'll be honest. I probably love the novice competitor, the new person better than anything, because it's so fun to guide an athlete from day one. Because you can really manipulate things so that they never have problems. When they come to us after a bad experience, it's oftentimes a year or two before we can resolve some problems. And then by then they might even have just burnt out on it and been like, nah. But, I always like, I think about Daraja a lot in this regard. She came to me as a novice. We went through her novice season. Then we went through her national season. Then we went through her pro season. Then we went through her Olympia phase, and then we got our top 4 in the world. And that was all through, an athlete that stuck with me, when she could have easily been like, you know what, now that I'm Olympia qualified, let me go work with one of these, coaches that's, always talking about the Olympia and stuff like that. But when you can mold someone from day one, from true novice to their max potential, and I gotta be honest, not everybody has the potential to go be in the top 4 at the Olympia, right? Maybe Daraja will win it someday, but not everyone has that potential. But when you can guide them from the beginning, that's really rewarding for me. And honestly, one of my favorite things is after like 3-4 years, someone being like Kathy Seitz. I coached her for 3 seasons, and we went from national to pro level. And when she did her pro shows, and I think she placed as high as 3rd, she realized that she was going to have to get on anabolics. And we had that discussion, and we even talked about what it would look like. And she was like, you know what, I'm going to retire. And she coaches herself now, and she looks amazing all the time. And she's so happy, right? That warms my heart, because I feel like we had a great run, a great career. We're still close friends. So like, that's the benefit of getting somebody early on in that novice phase.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, it's so valuable to work with a client long term too, because not only do you get to learn their body so well to the point where you just like what's going to work, what's not going to work, but I think a big value is also, I mean, you establish that close relationship, you establish that trust, and also as a coach, you get to learn your client's like psyche, and you can kind of, a lot of times you can, know what to expect from them before they even act, and I think that's really really important. And yeah, I think it's important, like when you are hiring a coach, it isn't just a dictatorship. It should be a collaboration. It is a relationship. You should also think this is so key. You should be very comfortable with your coach, because I think if you hire a coach and you may love everything they say, but if you don't personally feel very comfortable being open with them, consider how that's going to look, especially when you're in the depths of a contest prep and you have to share things such as like, oh, hey, I haven't had a bowel movement in 4 days, or like things like that, right? Because I know we've all gotten this before, but I've had people in my DMs, telling me, hey, like, this is going on right now with my current coach and this is happening. I'm kind of afraid to like talk to them about it. I'm like, that's not so great if you're not comfortable enough to open up to your coach about these certain things. So I think that level of communication and that comfort and that relationship is super important, and something you should really consider when you are going through the interview process and looking for a coach.
it absolutely isn't. And I've also learned throughout the sport, there's always 2 sides to every story, right? So for every
Yeah.
athlete that's like, I'm afraid to talk to my coach about this, maybe they coach and that athlete have had the same conversation 9 times. And they're like, oh, I did it again. And then they're afraid to talk to the coach. Now, you shouldn't ever be afraid to talk to your coach about that. But there are certain instances that I've seen that happen before. So there's always 2 sides to every story with that. And this just goes for life in general. Whenever you hear something, you're hearing one part of the story with
Oh yeah.
things. And always understanding that and realizing that. I'm not saying don't be compassionate and don't believe them or don't anything with that. Do your best, that you can help. But you know, there are, of course, different situations with that. And like you said, Paul, there is such joy about bringing athletes from novice like throughout. I coach a lot of first-time competitors, and this year it's been a lot of fun because most of these girls I've been working with for right about a year, and most of them are winning their open classes already, which is super, super cool to see because they trusted, they bought into the process, and they've worked hard. They've worked hard. And that is an incredibly rewarding feeling to be able to have just as a coach too, to help guide people. Because the big reason I got into this and the big reason that I love coaching bikini so much is because, in my opinion, it's the most used and discarded females in the sport, right? Like people take them, they run them into the ground, they wreck them, or they pump them full of drugs and they do great for a season or two, then you never see them again. And there's a lot of joy about with taking someone and showing them that there's a different way, right? That they can be healthy, they can enjoy it. And guess what? They can still win because everyone wants to win. That is the important part, right? But you can do that while being healthy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, and something else I think that we should dive into real quickly is, I think so many people get caught up in thinking that there's this like perfect time to hire a coach. So what I mean by that is obviously we are almost in October now and we've got the holidays amongst us. So I know a lot of people are sometimes a little hesitant or they think, oh, I'm just going to wait till after the holidays to reach out for coaching, which I get that. I mean, I think if you're going to be out of the country, if you're traveling every weekend, like maybe, okay, I understand that. But I also think if you're going to like wait until after the holidays, I mean, let's be honest, the holidays, we got Thanksgiving, we got Christmas, you may have a couple of other celebrations in the midst there, but truthfully, you hire a coach to help you navigate usually those tougher situations, right? So why would you not hire a coach before a relatively harder time of the year to stay on track on, right? Like having that extra accountability during a time period of the year that's already really difficult, maybe something you actually need. Whereas I feel like a lot of people don't think about it that way. If you hire a coach when you're already in a perfect spot, you don't really need any extra help. Okay, well, I mean, that's great. I'm sure there is something you can find help with, but if you hire somebody throughout the holidays, that's going to be very helpful for helping you to navigate that time that would otherwise probably be very difficult on your own. And what you don't want to happen is you don't want to, have no guidance throughout the holidays. And then come January, let's say you gain 10 pounds throughout the holidays and then you kind of backtrack during that time, right? So I think sometimes hiring coaches during those harder seasons of life can actually be very, very valuable.
It's a great point, Lexi. Look, in a perfect world, I'd rather have somebody start with me in June, July, August, September than start with me November, December. But I have had a lot of people start with me in November, December, getting prepared. Maybe they want to compete early next year, right? And having those conversations with them and then letting them know, hey, you don't have to be perfect during this November and December season, especially if they have a lot of family, if they're traveling a lot, they have vacations planned. Things are going to be tough, right? But being able to provide that little bit of guidance a lot of times can make them just not fall off the rails. And like you said, not gain that extra 10 pounds. And that is worth that coaching price for 2 months to not gain an extra 10, 15 pounds trying to go into a prep at the beginning of next year. Trust me on that. It is well worth it. Even if you are not perfect and you gain 4 or 5 pounds, at least it's not that 10 to 12. And it makes a massive difference. It's kind of like, it's not necessarily stopping everything bad from happening, but it can stop a lot of it from happening. Just having that accountability. Trust me, because I coach myself, it is hard without accountability. Trust me on that. The accountability part of coaching, people don't realize how important that is. That is honestly one of the most important parts about that. Kind of like therapy, having
You
an
have to turn
unbiased
in
person to talk to.
pictures.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I remember about my first time I hired a coach was that like feeling of like, oh, I got to take pictures on Monday for my coach. So I can't be a jerk on the weekend because that's the time when the pictures are going to be. And that was the first time that I had that really good momentum. I wasn't setting myself back a day or two here or there. And I don't know. Yeah. The idea of hiring a coach when things are perfect, I get it. I mean, I understand it, but we have a skill set as coaches. We've seen every possible scenario that you can deal with. Coached people through, gosh, all phases of life, breakups, moving, holidays, pregnancies, all kinds of things. And you just learn how to help people and meet them where they're at. And it just helps. It does help, but it's a case by case basis. And I never like being negative to someone that's like, okay, I think this is what's right for me. If you believe it's right for you, that's what you should do. But that's why we have the free consultations because, a lot of, we don't have it. We're not on the phone call with someone going, you need to sign up today. I got a special. I got 3 spots left. No, it's literally just a conversation. I'll paint a picture of my vision for your season or your career or whatever you're looking for. And I'll have people be like, cool, I'm going to reach out to you in 3 months when I'm ready to start. Great.
Sweet.
I never have a problem with that. So just getting the conversation started to understand where we're at is a great way to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then I think, so I mean, that can kind of segue us into, we can talk a little bit about how to go about. So let's say you're in a position where you're like, all right, I want to start to look for a coach. I think I'm ready to hire a coach. We can kind of talk a little bit about like where we would recommend, like how to research, how to find a coach, how to kind of go throughout that process. Because I definitely think it is important to do your research before doing so. Don't just hire the first person that you saw on your Instagram feed, or don't just hire the athlete out there who, you know, they look amazing in their social media posts. So, okay, because they have a great body, I'm going to hire them. Like, I think it's very important to do your research, because we've all seen situations too of competitors coming to us from coaches that, you know, they hired that have kind of steered them in a very negative direction. So if we can avoid that, then that's always going to be best. So let's talk a little bit about how to do that research and find some coaches that may align with what you're looking for.
Real quick, Lexi, before we go on that, I want to say one more thing about what Paul mentioned about like the sales tactics when you get on the phone with clients. If you or if you get on the phone with a coach and they're like, if you sign up now today, then I'll give you this discounted price, or you need to do this, then that is a desperation play. Because I can promise you, every phone call I get on, I don't care if someone signs up with me or not, because we all have plenty of clients. We are not actively out trying to get people because we have enough coming to us. If you get on the phone with somebody, it's like a used car salesman tactic. Nobody wants that. And that is a desperation play. And if they're desperate, that typically means they don't have enough people for a reason. So something to kind of think about with that, and a big, big red flag. I mean, we are talking red flags, but sorry, Lex, didn't mean to hijack
No,
that. But
I'm glad you brought that up, because yeah, you talking with a coach, it should not feel like it's a sales pitch at all. That gives me such an ick. I've always been somebody, even like when I'm shopping, if somebody like a sales person comes up in the store and they're trying to like sell me things, like I've just always been that person. It's like, nope, I'm going to buy what I want. I don't care what anybody says. So yeah, your coaching consultation should not feel salesy at all. You should not feel this immense amount of pressure to buy into whatever they're trying to sell you.
yep. Okay. So talking about where to find a coach, where to research for coaches.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about like, yeah, where we would recommend finding coaches, researching, kind of going down that avenue.
You know, I
So
always go back to like the way I think most people, you know, like, so if you think back to how we all got into the sport, we probably saw an athlete that inspired us.
Mhm.
And I think it can be kind of natural to go, oh, I want to see who their coach is. Um, that's generally the path that I think a lot of people end up finding a coach through. And I think for the most part, you got to be real careful of that, because um, a lot of coaching teams or coaches, it's actually almost like a pyramid scheme where they highlight a few amazing key athletes, and everybody else gets kind of just thrown into a bucket where they're getting, you know, cookie cutter. Um, and it's hard to know that that's going to happen, because sometimes these people are charismatic, they're well spoken. So yeah, I don't know the best way to navigate that. Um,
Yeah.
I have some thoughts.
Yeah. Same. Let you go first, Evan. I want to hear yours.
I think a good way to do it, especially if you're getting newer to the sport with it, is there's obviously people that you follow that are in the sport, or they have made very, very incredible transformations that are not top level pros. Like we all see those people, right? Like we have them all over our pages on our clients that, and I think a good mark of that is where they started to where they are now with that. And if you've seen some good progression with them and you've seen a positive attitude with them, then reach out to them and say, hey, like, who are you working with here? What's your experience with them? And do that with a few different people. And then after you get that, set up a consultation with those coaches and feel it out. Because the truth of the matter is, some people may have made incredible transformations because that coach threw them on a shitload of PEDs. That does happen. And you will pretty
yeah,
much know that when you get on a consultation with a coach, if one of the first couple things they talk about is drugs, or they ask you about that, that's something to think about and consider. Okay. I'm not saying that's the look, that's not something I would do for a client that's just getting started on things. And I'm not here to make choices for you, but it's something to think about on there. And interview multiple coaches with that. Ask them questions. Interview the coach. Interview the coach. Some of my best clients interviewed me, and they're also my
yeah.
most loyal and hardest working clients.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I almost get a little concerned if there's consult call that like the person doesn't have any clients and it's like 15 minutes in and it's like, okay, we're kind of wrapping up the call. Like sometimes my best clients are like, it's the consult calls that last 30, 40 minutes and they just have a
Mhm.
lot of questions. Like I love that. But yeah, I agree. I think that's a great way to go about finding a coach, Evan, is I mean, if you have friends, if you have just people who are not necessarily top level athletes that you follow on social media, you know, seeing who their coaches are, asking them, hey, like I know you work with so and so, like how do you like it? How do you like their coaching style? You know, and kind of feeling things out that way. I think that's a really great way to go about it. And I think asking multiple people is key because unfortunately, some people do just you know have negative experiences with the coach and it may not be the coach's fault, it may not be the athlete's fault, right? But you want to probably you know ask around, ask multiple people kind of their experiences with different coaches you may be interested in, and then just set up those consult calls and like Evan said, interview them, have some questions ready, you know, ask them if there are certain things that are really important to you, such as like if you want to hire a coach who is going to be available for you like all the time via text, like asks that person on the phone initially if that's something that they offer before hiring them and potentially being disappointed when they say, hey, email only, right? So like having those interview questions I think is very important, and then just getting some general feedback
Mhm.
from other people, other competitors that you follow on social media, again, who aren't necessarily like top level elite Olympians.
And don't be afraid to ask questions. One thing that really jumps off the page is a client that I had worked with me. He had worked with a pretty higher level named coach that he had known for a very long time and was very good friends with. And that coach had gotten too busy for him and he was looking for someone else. And he directly just told me, he was like, I'm looking to have like a close relationship with my coach. I'm looking to be able to be good friends with him. I'm looking to be able to reach out to whenever I want. And I was like, look, man, like if that was to happen naturally, cool, but that's probably not what it's going to start like. I don't know you, right? And that's not that's but I appreciate him saying that. I'm like, hey man, that someone more local to you that you see all the time is probably a better fit for you. Because look, I don't want someone to sign up with me that's not going to be a good fit. They're not going to work. They're not going to trust me. They're not going to grow with me. And it's going to end up being a short-term transactional relationship. And that's not what I want. I don't want that. I don't want to be on 8 million consultation calls and signing up a million different clients. If you do that, 900,000 of them are going to leave. So it's about getting the right people. It's about getting the right fit. And I think that's very important for everyone to understand when they look for a coach is finding out what that fit is for them. There are different coaches for different phases in life. There are some coaches that have more time to dedicate to athletes. There are some coaches that don't have as much time to dedicate to athletes on there. And understanding that and knowing that and making sure you're asking those questions is good because there is a coach out there for you. There is. You just got to find it.
Yeah, that's one of the first questions I'll get is like, oh, what shows to? 'Cause I want a coach that's at a show. And I'm like, cool, like you got no problems there. I'll let you know whatever show I'm going to be at. Um, and so that's also a big part of coaching is like making sure you find a coach that is going to fit what you want. You know, because I've had a few people come to me and say, yeah, my coach said they would be at my shows, but I've done 3 shows and I haven't seen them once. And granted, you know, depending on their schedule and the location, coaches can't be in 2 places at once. There was literally 2 weekends ago. I had 3 very good competitors at 3 different shows that all won overalls. I couldn't be at all the shows. I was at the one in Fort Lauderdale, right? But so it's important to make sure that your energy matches them. What's their availability like on show day? If they're not at the show, what's the process like?
Mhm.
So yeah, that's why I honestly think, you know, when I first started doing the weekly videos to my clients, you know, 5-6 years ago, I was nervous to do that because I thought, man, how am I going to send weekly videos to, you know, that's a very, seems like it's going to create a lot of work for me. It actually lessened my work because I was able to communicate effectively what I was wanting, right? Instead of just sending back new macros, new cardio, and a new training program, I was able to say, hey, good job this week. I'm really happy with the progress, but we're only 4 weeks out. That's why I'm changing things. I would have clients be like, are you mad at me? Like, mad at you? Why? Well, you're just very, you know, you're just very direct. I'm like,
Well, and
oh,
with the videos, they can hear your tone, right? Like, because Paul,
Yeah.
you're definitely somebody when you like text, you're like
Yeah,
most guys, like
you are.
not a lot of punctuation, not a lot of emojis. And like, for some females, we read into that. Not that like you mean bad by that, but for some females, I think, oh my God, no exclamation point. Is he mad? Right. So I think that the videos just really help for people to interpret your tone, and they just allow us coaches to be a lot more detailed and thorough with our feedback too. Like even things such as like with bikini girls, like posing, if I want to, talk about, hey, I don't like how you're doing this in your front pose, let's change this. Or, I can do a screen recording if I do that. So the videos just allow us to be so much more detailed. Like honestly, I don't know how I could get the information across to clients through just like an email. Like it would just be like we'd be missing out on so much if I did that.
Oh, you get it. One of the best points I've heard about athletes asking questions about show day, because that's a big thing, right? And that's a big issue in our industry too, is a lot of coaches not necessarily being there for their clients on show day, not even necessarily in person, right? But being available on show day
Oh
for
gosh,
questions,
I think it's
check-ins,
important. I've heard horror
FaceTimes.
stories like I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
hear from my coach, so I didn't eat all day. I'm like, why wouldn't you? Well, there was no plan in place, so I'm like, oh well, I'm sending a meal plan for show day
Yeah.
for that reason.
And look, and that's also a good part about coaching for a team, right? Like if
Right.
I wasn't at North Americans, Paul looked after my girls, we FaceTime, we did all that stuff. I'll be at
Yeah.
a show this weekend. I'll be helping Paul's girls there. I'll be helping my
Yeah.
clients there. Like that's the good part of this. We have a group chat on Instagram, right? To where we will send out like, hey, does anyone going to be at this show with that? We have clients competing. And even if we don't have clients competing, Lexie, we weren't at the Yorton Cup. You reached out, you're like, hey, your client's competing there, right? I'm like, yeah. So they started a group chat with the client. So they were able to meet up that way with it. There's tons of stuff that we get to do with this to make sure that everyone always feels comfortable. Because that's our honest goal, guys. If you work hard for a show, you should feel super comfortable on show day.
You should. And I think that's another, especially for newer competitors. I know like the topic of will you be there for show day? Like, will you come to all of my shows? That's always something you get asked. And I think there is the stigma that you have to have your coach there to do well. And yes, it can be an added bonus, especially if you just want like that kind of that blanket of like comfort. With you at that time. But honestly, if a coach prepares you well for show day, you should not necessarily need a ton of like dire changes on show day. Like it should just kind of be a matter of following the plan that your coach provided, making sure that you're sending pictures when your coach asks, just to make sure things look good, and just managing your stress, being where you need to be on time. I think some people have this idea that like they're going to wake up on show day and their physique is going to change dramatically by the time, when they wake up to go on show or to get on stage. But honestly, having your coach there is a bonus, but it's not necessarily needed, especially if a coach sets you up very well going into the show.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know of a time that I've heard from a client that they did not feel comfortable or taken care of on show day. And look, we're all athletes and we all active competitors, right? Like that would suck if we didn't have our coach available on show day. That'd be horrible.
Yeah,
Horrible.
I always feel like there's some cases where I almost feel like my clients are probably getting annoyed because like if I don't hear
Yeah.
from them for like a couple of hours, even if it's in the middle of the day when I know they're just chilling in between prejudging and finals, I'll just be like, hey, you doing okay? Like give me a little update. I almost feel sometimes annoying, but I think it is important to, provide that level of communication because we all work with clients honestly across the world.
Mhm.
So it's important, regardless where they're at, that we make sure that we are available to them on that show day that they have worked so hard for. So, and I think like this kind of what we're talking about right now, that can kind of segue us into talking about like specifically for contest prep coaches, what you should like, what us as a contest prep coach, what we should provide for our clients and maybe like what's realistic for us to provide for our clients and maybe what's not. So I think we can kind of segue into talking about that too.
Perfect. Kick it off, Lex. You're on a
Yeah, I'm
roll.
trying to think of something that's not.
Well, I think we could kind of like play off of what we were just talking about. I do think that, if you, I mean, as coaches, we always say, we wish we could be at every show, but also, if travel gets expensive too, and sometimes if you're just traveling for, let's say, one client, you have the plane, you have the hotel. I mean, I think some clients forget that that can be really hard to do. And we try to be at every show, or we try to at least have a coach at every show. But I think sometimes it's a little unrealistic to think, okay, I'm going to hire a coach and they're going to travel with me at every show
Yeah.
I do. I mean, that's great if they can do that, but that's not, I would just say that's probably not always a realistic thought. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yes, I always question this because if you just look at purely economically, right? And
Right.
I've been very open with people about this. They're like, "Well, you're going to come to the show?" I'll say, "I would love to. I wish I could, but then I would be paying you to coach you at that point. Like it
Right.
would cost me more in travel than I've ever made working with you to get there." So look, if an athlete is like, "Hey, I really want you at my show," and wants to pay for travel, wants to pay for all that to go out there for just them, yeah, we could consider that, right? But there are economic factors that play into this. And if you're only paying a certain amount for coaching, you can't expect us to spend, $1,000 on a plane flight, $400 on hotels, and then taking 2 days or 2.5 days to go there
And
for
this is where
one
you can
athlete.
communicate, this is why I'll often say like, hey, I'm going to be at this show and this show and this
Mhm.
show. And then you can pick, okay, I'd rather go to Texas or Florida or Georgia. Like I'm going to be at one of these shows. Um, Obviously I'm located in Florida, so I try to attend most of the shows. I didn't go last week, but you guys were both at the show in Lakeland. The weekend before that, I was the only coach, but I was down in Fort Lauderdale, right? And so, and we had another competitor on the team down there. So it's like, it is nice that we can kind of mix and match like that. But when it comes to traveling for shows, I'm very specific after a few years. I know the shows I want to go to.
Yeah.
Um, and there are some cities that I would probably go to just for one or two clients, just because I love going to those cities at this point.
Mhm.
But yeah, you definitely have to take that into account.
What is your favorite city to travel to for shows?
I mean, Charleston's an amazing city.
Okay.
Salt Lake City is an amazing city.
Oh yeah, you always rave
I knew you
about.
were going to say Salt Lake.
Yeah, Salt Lake is always so fun. I actually really like Fort Lauderdale, because you got Brett's gym and you got the beach, and it's just, I wouldn't want to live down there, but it's a really nice place to visit. Um, I don't know. Yeah, it's, shockingly, you wouldn't think it, but Pittsburgh, if you've never
I
been, is
thought
an
you were
amazing
gonna
city.
say that. It
Yeah.
was really neat going there,
Pittsburgh's
like just
great.
how the bridges, the architect, they're not maybe not architecture, just like the layout of the city.
Yeah.
It surprised me when we went in May. I thought it
Well, and
was
I don't think it's a very affordable city. Like the Airbnbs, the hotels are affordable. There's
yeah,
lots of good options for food and restaurants. There's museums, and it's a college campus right downtown. So there's all kinds of restaurants, and there's like that city center, where there's always like live
Mhm.
music on the weekends. I don't know. It's just, you can
yeah,
walk. It's a walkable city.
yeah,
Um,
it
Any
is.
city
yeah.
that's easily to navigate and walkable is awesome to
Yeah.
me.
And that's Charleston. Charleston for me is like, it's a 6 hour drive, but it's a fun drive through the country. I like driving through Gainesville, talking shit about them Gators. But like, those are the fun trips for me. Me and Steven, Evan, Lexie, Daraja, that's part of the sport for me at this point, is the adventure side of it. Like we get
Mhm.
to go be around awesome people
Yeah.
and also experience fun cities. I'm probably leaving out a bunch. I honestly miss going to Chicago. We used to go to Chicago for junior nationals, and I like Chattanooga. It's a very, very Charleston-esque city, but it's not Chicago. Chicago was amazing to
Chicago
travel to.
is really fun. Yeah, growing up, we went there a lot. Like we would drive there a lot as a family, just for like quick little weekend getaways. And Chicago is really fun. It's like, to me, it's a cleaner version of New York City. The only thing is, it just sucks in the winter. Like you don't. I mean, I wouldn't go there in the winter just because it's so cold.
Yeah, well, fortunately, junior nationals was in June,
That's good. Yeah.
and it was the perfect weekend to like go to the show. And then we would always either get the last flight Sunday or get a flight Monday. This was back when I was traveling with like Lauren Conlon and Steven. And we would stay in Chicago all day Sunday and go sightseeing and get some food and get like a deep dish pizza, like get a beer and go up to like the rooftop bars over the city.
Yeah.
So those do make the trips. And even Las Vegas, like
Yeah.
prior to coaching, every time I went to Las Vegas, it was a 3-day bender. But when you get into coaching and, going to, back then it was the USA's, and then the Olympia, Vegas is a great city because it can be either very chill if you stay just outside the strip. It can almost be like a regular, grocery store, and Airbnbs are cheap as crap there. It's very easy to drive around, but you can also go into the main drag and go to the hotels and the restaurants and be fancy. So Vegas is going to be fun for the Olympia for sure.
Yeah,
No
yeah,
doubt.
there's a lot of, yeah, it is kind of fun sometimes to travel for shows, either as a coach or even as an athlete, and just kind of make a day or two out of it, like a little mini trip for sure. But
Well,
yeah,
you did San Antonio for me last year, Lexi. I mean, that's a fun
yeah.
city too, right?
Oh,
Like they
that
got the
was,
river walk.
oh my gosh, yeah, and especially the hotel. Oh my God, I'll never forget. This was like so stupid of me. The hotel I stayed at was the one like on the Riverwalk. And I
Mhm.
remember getting there, and I got there a little early before my roommate got there, and I was like, I'm just gonna go and walk and go find the Riverwalk. And then I remember I walked down to the lobby and I asked the guy in the lobby, I'm like, hey, how far is the Riverwalk from here? And he's like, there's literally, you'd walk out the back of this hotel and it's right there. And I was like, oh, but yeah, it was really fun. It was, yeah, it's a neat little city too.
Oh, you know what? I didn't say Austin.
Yeah, Austin is, it's a little dicey in certain areas downtown for sure. What was it, like Fifth Street, Sixth Street?
Sixth Street is where
Sixth Street,
the
60
Gold
Congress.
is.
Yeah, you got
You just have like sleeping homeless people randomly about.
yeah, well, not only that, but like some of them getting in fights. I remember that one year
Oh,
we
were
had
you there? Were you there for that fight when we were
that
walking to
one
the
year,
gym?
yeah, we were walking to the gym and these two guys just start beating up on each other, and we had to like split our group up. It was a little, yeah, little
The bum
dicey.
fight. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a fun city too.
Yeah, me and Evan had a good year there. That was the year that Daraja and his fiance at the time were 1 and 2 in the show, and it was like
Oh
it was
yeah.
fun because we also went out and we were both healthy back then. We were both in our bulking
Yeah,
phases, and we were like, how much barbecue can we eat?
yeah, yeah. It was a lot. And how much Torchy's tacos and margaritas we
I
get
think
down.
I think you spent like $60 at that barbecue place.
$60 at barbecue. Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Well,
And a
let's talk.
Voodoo Donuts. Couldn't forget about
Oh, I
that.
did go there when I was in, yeah, Austin Voodoo Donuts. Honestly, I'm sure the donuts are great, but I remember I was a little disappointed in the ones I got at least. But
I'm not a voodoo. If you go, so Sixth Street was like the cool place. Now it's the other side. You go outside that hotel and you go the other direction, and the name of the street escapes me, but it's like a very hipster, cool little restaurants. They have these little sugar donuts. Oh my gosh, me and Steven got those. Yeah. So
oh goodness.
Austin's another fun one. Yeah, it's probably a little uncomfortable if you're a single female walking around, but yeah, I don't know. The homeless people in certain cities, yeah,
Some get aggressive.
they just kind of allow them to just like exist. Pittsburgh was like that. Austin was like that.
Yeah, because like I'm used to them here, like downtown Tampa, but
It's
there's not
not
that
bad.
many of them,
They
and
don't
like
let them. They don't let them. They have a relocation program there, so they'll move them.
that makes sense.
It
Yeah,
used to be, when I first moved to Tampa, it used to be really, really bad. And then within the last 5 years, it's not anything like that anymore. Because I used to get harassed
I
like
think it's
walking
because
out of the CVS.
there's a lot of money down now. Tampa has completely changed in the last 5 years. It used to be like
has.
almost like a rundown plain city, and it's becoming Miami, Fort Lauderdale real quick.
They think it is.
yeah,
Well, cost of living wise, it is.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I do well, I don't want to say every day, but almost every day for the past week, there is a man, I believe he's homeless, and he sits in this park that I pass every day when I walk to the gym. And thankfully he's friendly because I've seen him yelling at people before, but every day I walk past and he sees me and he gives me a wave. He winked at me the other day, and then he compliments me on like, what did he say the other day? He said he liked my shirt, and yeah, so we'll see if he's there today. I'm sure he will be.
Okay.
But, well, so let's talk about some things in terms of coaches, like contest prep coaches that are very realistic to expect a prep coach to provide. So let's talk about some of those things your coach should provide for you.
I think the biggest thing a coach should provide is a vision and a plan. Like, you should be able to confidently say, okay, how long is my prep going to last? What show should I be doing? And what's my trajectory? Like, that's one thing that I've gotten very good at over the years, is not giving people false hope. I just had a young lady sign up with me, and she was like, she had rebounded bad after her last show. And she was like, hey, can we start a diet right now? I want to lose weight. And I was like, no, like you're not in a place. And in the past, I might have been like, yeah, let's see how it goes. So understanding, like, setting realistic expectations, meeting people where they're at, but providing that, for me, it's a vision, and I call it reverse engineering. They're like, oh, my goal is to go to the Olympia. And I go, cool. That's a 3-year goal. We're going to work our way up the NPC, the national, the pro league. And by year 3, we should be in first call outs at pro shows, right? That's the vision that you have to create. And there's some girls that I'm like, yeah, you're going to go pro in one show and we'll be right in the mix right away. It just depends, but you can't give everybody that same vision. You've got to give them the truth.
It is shocking how many coaches give that same vision.
Right. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had some girls that came to work with me and their coach told them they will turn pro this year. And on our consultation, they were like, what do you think? And I was like, can we be frank here? I'm going to be honest with you. That's not happening this year. It's probably not happening next year. And it may happen the year after that. Maybe. But we got a lot of things to work on here.
Well,
and it gives them such a sense of relief though, too.
Well, and what's funny is when you tell them
already
that,
know this.
they know it, and they go, thank
it.
you for telling me the truth. I felt like I was being lied to. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Well, that's a sign of a really good coach who has your interest at heart. If because I always say as a coach, we tell clients what they need to hear, which is not always what they want to hear in the moment. But I think that is a sign of a really good coach. And at the end of the day, like when you get on a consult with a coach, you don't want just a yes man. Like, what's the point of somebody just you telling them things and they're just saying yes to everything, right? Like sometimes the reason you are hiring a coach is to get somebody who challenges what your current belief system is, right? And makes you better because of that. So definitely, yes man is not always a good scenario when you are looking for a coach, and somebody who is upfront and direct, even if what they say may kind of sting a little bit at first, like it's probably in your best interest long term.
I know if I say it, I'm like, yeah, we're going to have a really good shot to turn pro here quickly. I mean it because I don't say it often. I said it to a client I just started working with the other day, the one I sent you, Paul, a picture of. That is one of the rare ones. I was like, we will have a very good shot to turn pro very first show.
Yeah. So I had a girl reach out to me a while back, and the genetics were through the roof. I mean, the genetics are top 10 at the Olympia potential genetics, but I was like, are we going to be able to get you lean in time? And she was like, well, I have a breast augmentation scheduled for, I want to say it was September. And so after the first, little bit where we came down 7-8 pounds, she was like, you know what? This season's more important to me. She pushed off the augmentation until after this season. So she wants to be able to do the Ben Weider and nationals. And I'm like, thank you, because we were going to have to run you into the ground to have a shot. Whereas now, I was very blunt with her. I was like, listen, there are 10 athletes on this planet that have your structure, your muscle, your shape. So like, we need to take care of that, because you can easily just run yourself into the ground, chasing something, and you're always going to succeed, but you're never going to beat the best unless you actually, because if you bring the conditioning, you're going to win, because no one else can match the rest of the stuff. But you can lose when you're pretty good and someone else is at their best. And so to the fact that she was like, cool, let me kind of recalibrate my schedule, I was very excited for that. And that told me like, okay, she's very coachable. And I think she's going to have a long time in the sport because of that. And as a coach, that's that just makes your heart warm when you're like, cool, I'm actually going to have a positive impact on this person's career. Whereas I think she was getting mistreated. Like, she has kind of overpowering quads, and she was like squatting 3 days a week or something, and I saw her, I was like, what's going on here? We've literally dropped her quad size, brought her glutes up, brought her conditioning down, and it's starting to like get scary how good she's looking. And she actually won an overall a couple of weeks ago. But she could have been like, you know what? Yeah, I'm just done. And I would have been like, damn. So like, it's really, when you're painting the picture for that athlete's season or career, even like with Lexie, we've done it, right? Like, you've been very realistic when we've gotten on stage. You did the show with Ashton last year. And I think, were you in the same class in Tampa?
Yeah, we were. It was kind of a weird situation because like we had been measured at different classes. Because I remember we were like, oh, cool, we'll be in different classes. And then like
Yeah.
they put us in the same class. So we were in the same
You
class.
were like, you probably should have been B or C, and she should have been a height class above you.
Yeah, because yeah, that's what it was. I
But
was,
Tampa sometimes does like 5 classes or 6. They don't
Yeah,
do
they
it
do it
whole.
weird.
They do
yeah,
it based on the number. But I remember being like, Lexie, you were like 104 and Ashton was like 118 in the
yeah,
same class. And, you didn't like get upset about like, oh, I'm not big enough. You said, okay, that tells me that I'm not ready to go compete at the national level.
yeah.
Let's go back to building. And that makes me excited as a coach that like, we can do those things and not rush through this.
Right, right. Because it's like, but sometimes that's what you need as an athlete. You need to see things like that. You need to hear things like that. Otherwise, you may just end up spinning your wheels and then being more disappointed in the long term, right? So I think sometimes that is great perspective. And it also sets like a great perspective for, okay, I need to go into a building season. I need to be, comfortable with gaining X amount of weight because I know that this is kind of what I need to target next time. So yeah, so I think like being realistic is key there.
Yeah, some other things I think coaches should provide is honestly like a track record. They should be able to provide you with honest nutrition advice, be able to back that up with that as
Yes.
well. Training, if you're into training, they should be able to understand that, be able to explain things, be able to give you a reason why. They should be responsive to your check-ins too. And look, sometimes things slip through the cracks, right? Sometimes, not often, but sometimes they do. And if they do, and you reach out to them, they should be able to say, "Oh, I'm sorry. Let me get back to this right away and get it to you." Um, you know, I do my best to get back with the clients just as quickly as humanly possible with that. Some require a little bit more and it's a little bit harder to keep up with it, but I always do my best and I've never heard any complaints on the backside of that. Um, but being responsive is a big one, a really big one. And then if you
Responsiveness.
have questions, then being able to answer it and not saying, this is just the way I do things. That is not an okay answer either. And then obviously being understanding too. I think that's all. And then being there for your peak week, providing you with a plan, providing with a plan after the show, all stuff that should seem super basic, but not everyone does.
And also just like being a good person and like as a coach caring for your athlete outside of just putting them on stage. I think that's a big one too that you don't always see. And again, I'm not saying that you have to be best friends with your coach, but I think it is very important for a coach to take a genuine interest into like how are you off stage? Like are we grinding you to the ground just to get on stage and your mental health isn't like if your mental health is garbage, like what are we doing here? Like, I think it's good to have a coach who has your best interest at heart off the stage as well. And for you as a person, I think that's big. And just honesty, promptness with responses. You should not feel like you have to hunt down your coach. If you feel like that, that's probably not a great thing. Like I said earlier in this podcast, though, as coaches, we are not, we're not babysitters. We can't come after you every week or every time you're a little late for your check-in. I think communication is really important. And that can kind of go back to what we mentioned at the beginning of this podcast about how to know if you're ready to hire a coach. Like if you don't know how to communicate, consider like you may need to work on that before hiring an online coach, especially because I always tell my clients, the ones that communicate with me the best always do the best. The ones that don't communicate are usually the ones that aren't as satisfied or their progress isn't as great as the others. So I think communication is something that's very important and
Well,
something that you should
they
consider.
they get in their head, right? Like they're like, oh, I don't want to check in because I didn't drop weight, so I'll wait a couple
Yes.
days, or I
Yes.
don't want to. So this is I'm going to say this sentence, and this should be the title of the YouTube video. It won't be, but you can never bother your coach. You're never bothering us. And I like, hey, I hate to bother you. Like when someone sends that, I automatically correct them. I go, this is my job. I chose to be a coach. You are not bothering me. If I do not want to be, reached, I won't be reachable. Like I will shut my phone off. I will go to bed. I will do what I got to do to not be reachable. But there's no such thing as like someone being like me being like, oh, I can't believe I just got another email. Like, what is going on? Like, this is what we chose to do. Same thing with text messages, same thing with phone calls. I hate to bother you. You're never bothering us. And I think that's something that you've got to navigate immediately on that first call, that you make them feel comfortable in having access to you. Now we
Sure.
have boundaries. We've got multiple clients. We've got other things that we do. Sometimes we record a podcast. This takes up one whole hour of my week. So gosh, for this hour, I'm unavailable. But some of us have kids. Some of us have siblings, wives, husbands. Some of us are maybe,
That's
maybe we're whatever, cats, all of it. But so yeah, we have boundaries, but I've never once been like, I've said to someone, "You're bothering me."
Yeah. Well, consider this too. This is something I tell my clients a lot, and this may help anybody listening who struggles with that. Like, I'm not going to check in this week because, like, I didn't follow my plan, or my weight's up. I'm just going to wait a couple of days to check in. I always tell my clients, like, don't just look at check ins as a way for us to look at your quote unquote progress. Like, look at it almost in the sense of if it were like a weekly therapy session. Because if you had a weekly therapy session and you had a really crappy week, you are going to go to that therapy session, and want to go there even more than if it wasn't a crappy week. So on your hardest weeks, on your crappiest weeks, you should want to check in even more, right? Because that gives your coach some more feedback, and you guys can talk and you can game plan to make the next week better, hopefully. So that's kind of how I like to try to frame things, is like, don't worry if you made progress or not, or if it was a bad week or a good week. Like, please check in with me regardless, and just kind of look at it as like a checkpoint and a reflection time each week. So yeah, because I do think a lot of clients get into that mindset of, oh, I didn't do great this week, I don't want to disappoint my coach, or, and I would say the only thing that disappoints me is when clients don't check in. Like, that's kind of even more disappointing than if they had a really cruddy week, yet they're still checking in and they're staying accountable and saying, hey, I didn't have a great week, but here's what my plan is going to be moving forward.
Yep.
Yeah. Are there any other
I think
things you
that's
guys
it.
want to talk about in terms of just, I guess, this topic in total, like coaching, what coaches should provide, anything else that you feel like we didn't cover?
I feel like we've covered a lot, and
I think
yeah, I
so
think
too.
we're in a good spot.
Yeah, I think, from my perspective, my definition of good coaching has changed over the years. With a competitor, there's an expectation of doing well on stage, which, there's not many coaches that do better than us. We're constantly winning shows. And so like that part is secure. But also, I think now there should be an expectation that you should be able to come out of a show, succeed, and be mentally and physically healthy. To me, that has been the defining characteristic of the last couple years of my career, is that, clients will leave and clients will go, but they always leave me in a better place than I found them. And that to me makes me feel good. I've even had clients reach out to me after a couple of years of going to work with other coaches and being like, man, didn't realize how good I had it. Didn't realize how healthy you kept me, and things like that. So for me, that's part of the equation. And, there are times where I will struggle to push people or do the things to them that they want done, because they're looking for that short-term progress. But I know what's on the other side of that. I know, what's going to happen. And sometimes that means that relationship gets soured. But for me, good coaching, and this is something that you should expect, is to not only just get the result, because sometimes the result is purely based on the ego of the coach that you're working with, because all they care about is counting their numbers. But what does that coach's turnover look like? What is the situation with athletes down the road? And, the longevity of athletes. And so it makes the sport better if you come in and out of a prep in a good spot.
For sure. I'm glad you mentioned
Sure.
that. Yeah, because the after, whether it's after just the diet or after the prep, I think that's a very, very important phase. And yeah, I know us as coaches, we, like to pride ourselves off of being able to keep clients in a very healthy spot after a contest prep, and, keep them around long term.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I guess we'll wrap it up there. Thank you guys for listening to the Pro Physique Code. We love comments, so please leave comments. We also love, I guess, I don't know, what's our rating on, because this is our podcast is approaching 1.5 million downloads. So
Oh,
what's
yeah.
our
We're
iTunes like ranking or something? I don't know.
I'll have to look at that. I can give you guys better numbers next podcast, but I want to say last time I looked, we're 1.35 million unique downloads, which is awesome. But yeah, comment on the YouTube if you're watching there. Paul and I always try to respond to those. If you're watching us and you're on Instagram,
Evan.
yeah, Evan, one of these days we'll get Evan on YouTube. But if you're on Instagram, share. I know, like, if you're listening to this on Spotify, you can always share the episode to your story. We love to see those. Tag us all. Yeah, and any feedback you
You know
guys
what we should do? We should do a competition. Let's remind me next time, Lexi. So we're going to do this, guys.
Okay.
If you share the episode on your Instagram and tag me, Evan, and Lexi in the studio, the Pro Physique Code page, we should give something away.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that idea. Maybe
Let's-
we could we could do like a monthly giveaway or something, and
So we could do like a gift certificate for like a bikini, or we could reach out to some of the companies like TLF and be like, hey,
okay.
if you post the episode, we'll do a random, we'll take all the names and do a random drawing.
It's a great idea.
Love that. Yeah, we'll figure out. Yeah, I'll remind you of that, Paul. We'll figure out the little logistics of that, and yeah, we'll make it happen. That's awesome.
Oh, and if you're on our YouTube page and if you're listening to this podcast, pray for us. We got a hurricane heading our way. Although by the time this comes out, it'll be gone.
Yeah, it'll be
It
finished.
will. We'll have survived. I mean, by the looks of it right now, fingers crossed, it looks like, well, I hate to say that because it's going to hit.
Yeah, you never know, but it's going to skirt by us and head into the panhandle. Which
Yeah.
I think they got a direct hit last year up there. That might be bad news bears.
I know. That's why I feel bad saying I'm so thankful if it doesn't hit us.
But have you ever, because you live in Tampa now, Lexi, and Evan, you lived in Tampa. You ever hear about the pirate curse? That's why we never get the.
Oh, I
Yeah.
heard it was like an Indian.
There hasn't been a direct hit in Tampa
Yeah.
in
Well,
I don't think ever. I think they say
I
that's
think
why
like
it's
100 years or something.
Yeah.
you know what's funny is so when I moved down to Tampa, it was right before Hurricane Irma, and I'm sure you guys remember that, and they thought that was going to be almost a direct hit. And so I remember the University of Tampa campus shut down. We had to evacuate. At the time, I didn't have anybody in Florida that I knew, so I had to fly back home for 2 weeks after just moving down. And yeah, that was my nice little welcome to Florida. But right now it's beautiful out.
Yeah.
Cruise ships are still leaving, which is kind of weird to me that the cruise ships are still porting and leaving, but yeah.
Okay,
It's
so
gonna be
I found
17
it.
hours of drive home after that.
It says a
17 hours.
local legend says that the Tocobaga tribe's burial mounds along the coast of Tampa Bay protect from hurricanes. The tribal was in small villages from 900 to 1500. Some locals believe the tribe blessed the mounds for protection. However, it is unlikely that supernatural forces are thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that.
The reality is that Tampa Bay, the last time they had a direct landfall was 1921, when a Category 3 hit Tarpon Springs.
As long as we can.
11-foot storm surge, and it killed 8 people. And guess where I grew up and went to high school? Tarpon Springs. Yeah.
Really? Yeah, they said that we should know by this evening the exact route. So as of now, it's still hitting, I think, the Tallahassee area, Panhandle area.
Yeah.
So
The question is, because I'm traveling this weekend, is that wind going to affect flights from the Tampa airport? But we'll see.
we shall see. Well, you
All
guys
we can
will
do.
know next week when we do another podcast.
Yes. Or if we don't,
Oh gosh. We'll
there's
give
no
you
podcast.
an update next week.
Oh, I'm just kidding. We'll make it happen. We'll
Well,
go. You might have to call your friends in Georgia, Evan, because that thing's headed right for Valdosta, Thomasville area. That thing's going right up there.
Yeah, it is. They're
Yep.
gonna get some rain for sure.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening.
bye guys.
So yeah.